Millionaire kisses his new housekeeper to escape an arranged marriage and fell in love with her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The story begins with the glittering skyline of New York City shimmering against the night. Inside the Hale family mansion, a celebration was underway. The chandeliers sparkled, the orchestra played soft classical music, and guests in tuxedos and gowns whispered about the most eligible bachelor in the room, Adrian Hale. Adrian was not just wealthy. He was the heir to Hale International, a business empire that dominated shipping, finance, and luxury real estate. His family had carefully cultivated his public image as a golden boy, destined to secure their dynasty with a powerful alliance. And tonight, that alliance was supposed to be sealed. The Hale and Whitmore families had been negotiating a merger, disguised as a marriage. Evelyn Whitmore, the daughter of a rival conglomerate, was paraded around the party as Adrian's future bride. The press was invited. Champagne glasses clinked in anticipation. But Adrian? He stood apart. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit. His expression was a mask of cold politeness. Inside, he seethed. He hated the idea of being sold off like a pawn. He had spent his life earning respect in the boardroom, and now his parents were ready to strip him of freedom in exchange for another layer of wealth and control. He walked toward the balcony, searching for air away from the suffocating crowd. That was when his eyes caught sight of someone who did not belong among pearls and diamonds. She stood near the servants' corridor, holding a tray of drinks with nervous hands. A new face. Her uniform was pressed but plain, her eyes wide as she tried not to trip under the weight of crystal glasses. Her name was Emma. She had just been hired as a housekeeper a few days earlier. She kept her head down, focused on her duties. But tonight the grand party threw her into a world she had never imagined. She did not know anyone was watching her, least of all Adrian Hale. As the evening reached its peak, Evelyn approached Adrian with a smile sharp as glass. Cameras followed. Guests turned. His mother whispered firmly in his ear, "It is time. Announce the engagement." Adrian's jaw clenched. He could almost hear the trap snapping shut. His future, his freedom, all being traded away in one public spectacle. Then, in a single flash of impulse, his gaze shifted back to Emma. She was standing just a few steps away, frozen like a deer in headlights, as one of the guests scolded her for spilling a drop of champagne. Humiliation painted her cheeks crimson. Without a second thought, Adrian strode across the floor. Before anyone could question, before the reporters could adjust their cameras, he reached for Emma's wrist, pulling her forward into the center of the room. Gasps echoed. Murmurs swelled. Evelyn's face drained of color. And then, Adrian Hale did the unthinkable. He tilted Emma's chin up, bent his head, and kissed her. The room erupted. Flashes from cameras burst like fireworks. The orchestra faltered and fell silent. Emma's tray clattered to the marble floor. Her heart pounded in disbelief as Adrian's lips pressed against hers, not with tenderness, but with defiance. When he finally pulled away, his deep voice carried through the hall. "She is the one I choose. She is my fiancée." The declaration shattered the carefully built plans of both families. And in that single reckless moment, Adrian Hale changed not only his own fate, but Emma's life forever. The ballroom was still buzzing long after Adrian Hale's shocking kiss. Guests whispered in frantic circles, journalists scribbled headlines, and Evelyn Whitmore stormed out with her entourage. Adrian's mother looked as if the earth had slipped beneath her feet. But Adrian? He held Emma's trembling hand in his, calm and unflinching, as if this was the plan all along. Emma's world, however, had collapsed in a single instant. She had been hired to polish silverware, to carry trays of wine, to quietly fade into the background of this mansion. Yet now, cameras had immortalized her lips pressed against the air of Hale International. She had no idea what to do or how to escape. Later that night, after the guests dispersed and the mansion quieted, Emma tried to slip out of the grand hall. But Adrian was waiting for her in his study. He stood by the fireplace, his expression unreadable, his black tie loosened around his neck. "Sit," he said firmly. Emma clutched the strap of her small purse. "Mr. Hale, I do not know what that was, but I cannot—" "You already did," Adrian cut in. His eyes locked on hers with an intensity that pinned her in place. "You saved me tonight." Emma shook her head. "Saved you? You ruined me. Tomorrow my face will be on every newsstand in Manhattan. They will call me a thief, a liar. I will lose this job." Adrian's tone softened, though his words carried weight. "You are right. The media will not be kind, but I can fix this. I can protect you. If you help me." Her heartbeat quickened. "Help you? With what?" He walked to his desk, pulled out a leather folder, and laid a document before her. "With this, a contract. 6 months. You will act as my fiancé. In public, you will stand by my side. In private, nothing changes. At the end of 6 months, I will pay you $200,000, and you will walk away with your freedom." Emma stared at the papers, her hands shaking. The sum was staggering, more money than she could dream of earning in 10 years of cleaning houses. But the idea of pretending to belong in Adrian's world was terrifying. She whispered, "Why me?" Adrian's gaze did not waver. "Because you are honest. You are not part of their world. They cannot accuse me of making a political alliance if I choose someone like you. With you, I am free." Emma felt as if the walls were closing in. She thought of her small rented apartment, the medical bills piling up for her younger brother back home, the endless cycle of working 3 jobs just to stay afloat. $200,000 could change everything. It could buy her brother the surgery he needed. It could buy her family hope. But it would also bind her to Adrian Hale, a man she barely knew, in a lie that the entire city would be watching. Her voice trembled. "What happens when they find out the truth?" Adrian stepped closer, his presence overwhelming but steady. "They will not. Not if we play our parts. You smile when the cameras flash. You walk into every gala on my arm. You look me in the eye like you belong here. That is all I ask." Emma could barely breathe. Her entire life had been small, ordinary, invisible. And now, this man was offering her a stage brighter than she had ever imagined, along with chains she could not see the weight of yet. After a long silence, she whispered, "I will think about it." Adrian's lips curved, not into a smile but into something sharper. "You do not have much time. The press is already printing tomorrow's headlines. You are either with me or against me." The fire crackled in the silence between them. Emma's pulse pounded in her ears. For the first time, she realized that this was not just a kiss. It was a contract. And once she signed, there would be no turning back. Emma signed the contract the very next morning. Her hands still trembled as she placed her name at the bottom of the page, but the decision was made. She thought of her brother lying in that small clinic bed, and she knew she had no choice. $200,000 was not just money, it was survival. From that moment forward, her life transformed overnight. By evening, the newspapers had already declared her identity. "Mystery woman engaged to Adrian Hale" blazed across headlines, with photographs of their kiss splashed in glossy print. Reporters gathered outside the mansion gates, shouting her name. Neighbors from her old neighborhood called in disbelief. Emma, the maid, was now the fiancée of New York's most eligible millionaire. But with this transformation came cruelty. Her first public appearance with Adrian took place at a charity gala only 3 days after the contract was signed. Emma wore a gown hand-picked by a stylist, shimmering silver against her skin. Her hair was styled into soft waves, her makeup polished until she barely recognized the reflection in the mirror. To the world, she looked like she belonged. Inside, she felt like an imposter. As Adrian led her down the marble steps into the grand hall, cameras flashed furiously. Guests turned their heads, smiles thin and sharp. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Who is she? She was one of his housekeepers. A maid? Impossible. No, it is true. He plucked her straight from the servants' quarters. The words sliced into Emma's chest. She forced herself to keep walking, her hand resting on Adrian's arm. His posture was impeccable, his expression unreadable, as if the gossip around them did not exist. At the table, Evelyn Whitmore sat with her parents, glaring daggers across the room. She leaned toward another guest and laughed loudly, her voice carrying far enough for Emma to hear. Adrian must have lost his mind. Look at her. She does not even know which fork to use. Emma's cheeks burned as she glanced at the endless array of silverware in front of her. She picked one up awkwardly, her hands shaking. The women around Evelyn snickered. Adrian noticed. Without a word, he reached over and casually switched his fork with hers, his movements smooth and deliberate. He leaned closer, his deep voice low enough only for her to hear. Do not let them see you falter. They feed on weakness. Emma swallowed hard, holding back the sting of tears. She forced herself to smile, though her heart was crumbling. Throughout the evening, the insults continued. A man in a crisp suit asked if she had scrubbed Adrian's floors before she scrubbed into his life. A woman dripping in diamonds remarked that Emma's gown was beautiful but a little too shiny for someone so new to high society. Every word was a knife, wrapped in silk. Emma wanted to flee, to run back to her tiny apartment and escape the suffocating weight of wealth and cruelty. But every time her resolve wavered, Adrian's hand steadied hers under the table. His grip was firm, grounding. When the orchestra began to play, Adrian stood and extended his hand to her. Dance with me, he commanded softly. Emma's heart leapt. I do not know how. Then follow me. On the dance floor, the room seemed to hush. All eyes were on them as Adrian guided her across the marble floor. His movements were flawless, his presence commanding, and Emma, despite her clumsy steps, found herself moving in rhythm with him. For the first time that night, she felt safe, even admired. The whispers shifted. Some still sneered, but others began to murmur differently. Perhaps she has more grace than we thought. He looks at her, differently. When the dance ended, Adrian's hand lingered at her waist, his eyes meeting hers with a flicker of something unspoken. In that moment, Emma realized that this arrangement was no longer just about money. It was about survival, dignity, and perhaps something deeper she was not ready to name. But as the night ended and the limousine doors closed, Emma caught sight of the headlines flashing across a reporter's tablet. From maid to millionaire's bride, how long will the fantasy last? Her chest tightened. Because even if the world began to accept her presence beside Adrian, she knew the truth. This was all a contract, a performance, a lie. And lies, no matter how beautifully told, always came with a price. The days that followed the gala were unlike anything Emma had ever known. What had once been a quiet life of cleaning rooms and folding linens turned into a performance on the grandest stage. Every step she took was watched, photographed, and dissected by strangers. Every smile had to look genuine. Every touch with Adrian had to appear intimate. But behind the cameras, the tension between them was constant. Living under the same roof now felt like walking through a battlefield. Adrian remained composed and commanding, treating their arrangement with the same precision he gave to corporate negotiations. To him, Emma was a partner in strategy, a piece of the puzzle to protect his freedom. For Emma, the pressure was suffocating. Each morning began with the stylist arriving at the mansion, pulling her from bed before dawn to prepare her for another charity luncheon, another board dinner, another interview. Emma longed for her old uniform, plain and simple. The gowns itched. The heels pinched her feet. She stumbled through the rehearsed lines that Adrian had drilled into her. One evening, after yet another long day, Emma stood in the grand kitchen, still in her glittering dress, staring at the untouched trays of catered food. She quietly opened the refrigerator, searching for something simple, something real. She pulled out eggs and bread, beginning to cook scrambled eggs the way she used to for her brother. Adrian entered unexpectedly, loosening his tie. He paused, surprised to see her at the stove. "What are you doing?" he asked. Emma glanced at him, her voice tired. "Cooking. I cannot eat another plate of caviar or foie gras. I just want something that feels like home." Adrian watched her crack the eggs into the pan. The scent filled the air, simple and warm. Slowly, he walked closer, his usually sharp expression softening. "It smells good," he admitted. She handed him a plate, and for the first time in weeks, they sat at the same table without reporters, without flashing cameras, without pressure. Adrian took a bite, then another, and his lips curved slightly. "Better than the chef's," he said quietly. Emma laughed, a sound that startled even her. For a fleeting moment, the mansion did not feel so cold. But the fragile peace never lasted long. The next morning, tabloids published new photographs of Emma fumbling with her purse at the gala, calling her awkward and unfit for high society. The comments stung, but what hurt more was overhearing Adrian's assistant whispering to him, "She is becoming a liability." Adrian had not defended her in that moment. He had simply dismissed the assistant with a wave of his hand. That night, as they prepared for another event, Emma snapped, "Do you ever consider how this feels for me? To be paraded around, mocked by everyone, while you stand there like nothing touches you?" Adrian turned to face her, his eyes narrowing. "Do you think it is easy for me? Do you think I enjoy dragging you into these rooms? This was your choice too, Emma. You signed the contract." Her voice broke, raw with emotion. "I signed it to save my family, not to be humiliated every single day." For the first time, Adrian's composure cracked. His jaw tightened, but there was pain in his eyes. "And I signed it to survive my family. Do not forget that." The silence that followed was heavy. Neither of them spoke as the chauffeur arrived to take them to yet another glittering event. In the car, Emma sat rigid, her hands clenched in her lap. Adrian stared out the window, lost in thought. And though they sat side by side, the distance between them felt like miles. Yet in the quiet moments, the shared meal in the kitchen, the brief glance across the ballroom, the unspoken acknowledgement of each other's pain, a fragile thread was forming. A thread neither of them understood yet, but one that pulled them closer, despite every wall they tried to build. The weeks that followed were merciless. Emma's face was no longer just a fleeting headline. It was everywhere, on the covers of glossy magazines, on gossip blogs, and plastered across television screens in sleek news studios. The world had already decided who she was. Some called her a Cinderella, others called her a fraud. But the sharpest knives came not from strangers, but from inside Adrian's own world. The Hale family board of directors demanded meetings. They whispered about the scandal, about investors losing confidence, about how a housekeeper masquerading as a fiancé would tarnish their empire. Adrian's father, stone-faced and commanding, confronted him in the study one evening. "You will end this charade, Adrian," his father's voice thundered. "Our legacy is not a stage for your rebellion. You will announce the engagement to Evelyn Whitmore before the quarter is over, or you will lose everything you have been given." "Rustin." Adrian's fists tightened, but his reply was steel. "I would rather lose it all than live as a pawn." The words only deepened the rift, and the family's pressure grew. They hired investigators to dig into Emma's past, desperate to find a crack in her dignity, something to discredit her. And soon enough, the rumors began to spread. At a high-profile charity banquet, Emma walked in on Adrian's arm, her gown a soft shade of blue that made her feel almost invisible. But there was no hiding. As she entered, a woman in pearls smirked loudly enough for the crowd to hear. "Do you know who she really is? She scrubbed toilets in this very mansion. That is his fiancé?" Pathetic. Laughter rippled across the room. Cameras turned eagerly to catch her reaction. Emma's throat tightened. Her fingers trembled against the clutch in her hand. She wanted to disappear. But before she could retreat, Adrian's voice cut through the cruelty like thunder. "Enough." The room fell silent. Adrian stepped forward, his eyes blazing as he looked at the sneering faces before him. "If anyone here believes dignity is measured by wealth, then you are welcome to leave. Because the woman standing beside me has more honesty in her heart than most of you will ever know." Gasps echoed through the hall. Some turned away in shame, others whispered in shock. Emma's eyes widened, her chest aching with disbelief. He had defended her, not behind closed doors, not in a whispered reassurance, but here, in front of everyone who had mocked her. For the first time, Adrian had chosen her. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Reporters snapped photos of Adrian's declaration, headlines already forming in their minds. Emma stayed silent, her heart pounding as she processed what had just happened. Later, back at the mansion, she confronted him softly in the dimly lit corridor. "Why did you do that?" Adrian loosened his tie, his voice low but unwavering. "Because they needed to hear it, and because you deserve better than their cruelty." Emma looked at him, unsure of what to say. The man who had once dragged her into a reckless scheme had now stood as her shield. Yet even as her heart stirred with something dangerous, the world outside was sharpening its knives. Tomorrow's papers would not praise Adrian's words. They would twist them, spin them, and turn them into another storm. Emma lay awake that night, staring at the ornate ceiling of her borrowed room, realizing a chilling truth. The contract had promised her money, but it had never promised safety, and the higher she rose in Adrian's world, the more the shadows around them seemed determined to drag her back down. The days after Adrian's public defense of Emma felt different. The world was still vicious, the press relentless, but something had shifted inside the mansion walls. For the first time, Emma no longer felt entirely alone. She replayed his words in her mind at night, the way his voice had thundered against the crowd. The woman standing beside me has more honesty in her heart than most of you will ever know. It was more than protection, it was respect. Adrian, too, found himself unsettled. He had spoken from instinct, not strategy. He had intended for Emma to be nothing more than a shield, a temporary partner in a staged romance. But when he saw her eyes filled with humiliation, when he heard the laughter directed at her, something inside him had snapped. He could not stand by. Now, every glance at her carried weight he had not anticipated. One rainy evening, Emma was in the library, stacking books that had been carelessly left on the tables after a family gathering. She hummed softly under her breath, unaware that Adrian stood at the doorway watching her. The storm outside cast shadows across the shelves, but her presence made the grand room feel warm. "You should not be cleaning in here," Adrian said quietly, stepping forward. Emma startled, turning to face him. "Old habits. I am used to working, not being waited on." Adrian studied her, the corners of his mouth curving slightly. "It is strange. In rooms filled with the most powerful people in New York, you look out of place. But here, you look like you belong." Emma flushed, unsure how to respond. She lowered her eyes back to the stack of books, but her heart raced. Moments like these began to multiply. Small gestures, almost invisible to others, but undeniable to them. Adrian would brush his hand against hers when passing her a wine glass at dinner. Emma would instinctively adjust his tie before they stepped into flashing cameras. Each touch was brief, fleeting, yet charged with something neither of them dared to name. One night, after another exhausting gala, they returned to the mansion. Emma kicked off her heels, wincing as her feet throbbed. Adrian noticed and silently fetched a first aid kit. He knelt before her, lifting her foot gently into his hand. "You do not have to," she began. "I want to," Adrian interrupted, his voice softer than she had ever heard. He carefully placed a bandage on the blister forming at her heel. His touch was steady, deliberate. When he looked up at her, their eyes locked, and the air between them grew thick with unspoken emotion. Emma's breath caught. For the first time, she saw not the untouchable millionaire, but a man who carried his own burdens, who had his own scars hidden behind that polished armor. She whispered, "Why are you being kind to me now?" Adrian held her gaze, his jaw tight. "Because I see you, Emma. Not the headlines, not the contract. You." Her chest tightened as if the walls she had built were crumbling, but she forced herself to remember the truth. This was a contract, an arrangement, a lie dressed as love. If she let her heart believe otherwise, she would lose herself. Still, that night, lying in her bed, Emma pressed her hand against her chest, feeling the wild rhythm of her heart. She tried to tell herself it was only gratitude, that it was nothing more. But deep down, she knew. The lines between obligation and desire were blurring, and if she was not careful, she would fall. The fragile thread of connection between Adrian and Emma grew stronger with each passing day, but so did the storm gathering around them. The Hale family had not stopped digging into her past, and now their cruelty struck with precision. It began with a single headline, "From Maid to Millionaire. Did Emma manipulate Adrian Hale?" The article claimed Emma had orchestrated the kiss at the gala, that she had preyed on Adrian's vulnerability to secure her place by his side. Soon, more stories followed. Grainy photographs of her old neighborhood, interviews with neighbors who barely knew her, and twisted tales about debts and desperation. Emma's phone rang endlessly with reporters demanding answers. Strangers shouted at her outside the gates. Overnight, she had been transformed from a curiosity into a villain. One evening, she found herself in the mansion's study, clutching one of the tabloids in her trembling hands. Adrian entered, his jaw set, his eyes burning. "They are lying," he said sharply. "I will handle this." Emma shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "You cannot silence all of them. And maybe they are right. Maybe this was a mistake." Adrian stepped closer, his voice low and fierce. "Do not say that. You are not a mistake." But Emma pulled back, her voice breaking. "Look at me, Adrian. Look at what this has done. My life is gone. My name is ruined. And it is only going to get worse." Adrian's hands clenched at his sides, torn between fury and helplessness. "I can protect you." Emma's voice rose, raw with pain. "You cannot even protect yourself from them. You are fighting your own family. How can you protect me?" The silence that followed was unbearable. For the first time, Emma saw not the confident CEO but a man cornered, chained by the very power he carried. That night, Emma made a decision. She packed her small suitcase, her hands shaking as she folded the modest clothes she had brought from her old apartment. She placed the signed contract on the desk, the inked promise that had bound them together now nothing more than paper. When Adrian returned to his room later, he found her standing at the door, her eyes red from crying. "I cannot do this anymore," she whispered. Adrian's chest tightened, his breath catching. "Emma, do not leave. We can fight this together." Her lips trembled, but her voice was steady. "No, you are strong enough to face them. But I am not, and I will not let them destroy me. Goodbye, Adrian." With that, she turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing through the marble hall. Adrian stood frozen, watching the woman who had become more than a contract disappear into the night. For the first time in years, he felt powerless. The empire he had built meant nothing without her. But Emma was gone, and all that remained was the hollow echo of her absence, and the unbearable weight of a love he had never intended, but could no longer deny. The morning after Emma left, the mansion felt hollow. The staff whispered in silence, and Adrian moved through the halls like a shadow. He had built his life on control, on power, on making decisions that shaped the future of an empire. But in losing Emma, he realized he had lost something far greater than influence. He had lost the only person who had seen him not as a millionaire, but as a man. The press, however, did not pause to grieve. Headlines erupted like wildfire. "Emma walks out, contract exposed. Hale romance crumbles under pressure." Commentators debated her motives, some calling her a gold digger, others painting her as a victim. The narrative spun wildly, and Adrian knew that if he remained silent, Emma's name would be destroyed forever. 3 nights later, Adrian stood at the podium of a crowded press conference. The Hale family board had begged him not to appear. His parents had warned him that speaking the truth would end the dynasty they had so carefully constructed. But Adrian was done living in their cage. The room was packed with reporters, microphones flashing like 100 sharp eyes. Adrian adjusted his tie, then placed both hands on the podium, steady and unflinching. "I called you here tonight because there has been speculation about Emma Hart and her role in my life," he began, his voice carrying through the hushed room. "You deserve to hear the truth, and so does she." A ripple of anticipation spread through the crowd. Cameras zoomed closer. "Yes, Emma was once a housekeeper in my family's home. Yes, our relationship began as something arranged, something that was never meant to be real. I dragged her into the spotlight because I was desperate to escape a marriage that had nothing to do with love. I used her. I made her carry the burden of my rebellion." Gasps filled the room. Adrian continued, his tone heavier, more personal. "But what the world does not know is that Emma never once asked for money, or status, or fame. The only thing she asked for was dignity, and I took that from her. I let you believe she was less than she is. And for that, I will spend the rest of my life making it right." His words shook the hall, reporters scribbling frantically. Adrian's eyes scanned the cameras, as if reaching for her through the lens. "Emma Hart is not a gold digger. She is not a fraud. She is the most honest, selfless woman I have ever known. She reminded me that love is not about contracts or alliances, but about choosing someone, every day, for who they truly are. And today, I choose her, publicly, irrevocably, without apology." The room exploded with shouts and flashes, but Adrian stepped back, ignoring the chaos. For the first time, his truth was out. Later that evening, He walked alone through Central Park, the city lights glowing against the dark sky. He thought of Emma, wondering if she had seen the broadcast, if she believed his words. The weight of uncertainty pressed against his chest. Meanwhile, Emma was in her modest apartment, her suitcase half unpacked, her brother's medical bills stacked on the table. She had sworn to herself she would not turn on the television, but curiosity and a fragile thread of hope won. She watched him on the screen, his voice unwavering as he confessed to the world. She saw the sincerity in his eyes, the vulnerability he had never allowed himself to show. And for the first time, Emma realized Adrian Hale was no longer the cold, untouchable millionaire. He was a man willing to risk everything for her. Tears blurred her vision as she pressed a hand to her mouth. She whispered to the empty room, "Why would you do this for me?" Because deep down, she knew the answer. Adrian was no longer playing a role. The contract was ashes now. What he had declared was not strategy. It was love. The night after Adrian's press conference, New York City buzzed with chaos. News outlets replayed his words endlessly, dissecting every syllable. Social media erupted with divided voices, some praising his courage, others condemning him for betraying his powerful family. But beneath all the noise, one truth could not be ignored. Adrian Hale had publicly chosen Emma Hart. Emma sat in her small apartment, the glow of the television fading into silence. She had turned it off hours ago, but her heart still pounded with every echo of his voice. His confession had stripped him bare, and she could not deny the sincerity in his eyes. Yet doubt still clung to her. Was it too late? Could she ever step back into his world without being consumed? The answer came when she heard a knock at her door. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. Slowly, she opened it, and there he was, Adrian, drenched from the rain, his dark suit clinging to his frame, his eyes fixed only on her. "Emma," he said, his voice hoarse, as if he had been running for miles. She stared at him, her heart warring with her mind. "Why are you here? After everything? Why?" Adrian stepped inside, water pooling at his feet, but he did not care. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, worn at the edges, nothing like the lavish diamonds his family would have chosen. "I am here because I cannot let you walk away," he said, his voice trembling with raw honesty. He opened the box, revealing a simple gold ring, elegant and unpretentious. "This is not about contracts or alliances or family power. This is about you. About us. I love you, Emma. I love you in a way I never thought possible, and I am asking, not as a Hale, not as a millionaire, but as a man, will you marry me, for real this time?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. She covered her mouth with her hand, overwhelmed by the moment. "Adrian, you do not understand. I am not like them. I do not belong in your world." He shook his head, stepping closer, his voice steady and resolute. "Then I will leave their world behind. I already told them I would walk away from the fortune, the empire, everything if I had to. None of it matters without you." Her tears spilled freely now, falling down her cheeks as she whispered, "Why me?" Adrian's eyes softened, and for the first time, his walls crumbled completely. "Because you see me. You saw the man behind the suit, behind the wealth, behind the lies. You gave me something no one else ever has: truth. And I cannot live without that. I cannot live without you." Emma's hands trembled as she reached out, her fingers brushing against the simple gold ring. It was not lavish, it was not grand, but it was real. It was everything she had ever wanted: a love built on sincerity, not power. Her voice broke as she nodded, whispering through her tears, "Yes, Adrian, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands shaking with relief. And then he pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that erased every shadow, every doubt, every scar left behind by the contract that had once bound them. The storm outside raged, but inside that small apartment, there was only warmth, only love. In the weeks that followed, the world continued to chatter. Some still sneered, others slowly softened. But Adrian and Emma no longer lived for their approval. Together, they walked hand in hand through the fire of public scrutiny, unshaken. Adrian resigned from his family's board, choosing to rebuild his own company from the ground up, on his own terms. Emma stood by his side, not as a maid, not as a contract bride, but as his partner, equal in dignity and in love. On their wedding day, there were no flashing cameras, no staged alliances, no forced smiles. Just a small garden, close friends, and Emma's younger brother smiling from his wheelchair, finally healing with the care they had once thought impossible. As Emma walked toward Adrian, dressed in a simple gown that reflected who she truly was, she saw him waiting at the altar with tears in his eyes. And when he took her hand, the world faded away. Adrian spoke his vows softly but firmly. "I once made you a promise with a contract. Today, I make you a promise with my heart. I will choose you every day, for the rest of my life." Emma's voice trembled as she replied, "And I will choose you, not the millionaire, not the CEO, but the man who fought for love, and for me." The guests wept, and the two of them sealed their vows with a kiss, this time not as part of a performance, but as the beginning of a forever they had both fought to claim. The story that began with a reckless kiss to escape an arranged marriage ended with a true one, a kiss of love, of commitment, of justice, and as they walked down the aisle together, hand in hand, the world watching could no longer deny it. Love had won,